Here's another one you don't want to hear. Frankly, if you like.
Hello and welcome to the Power Chord Hour podcast, episode 9. I'm your host, Anthony Merchant, here with you this week. Thank you so much for checking it out. And last week, I told you while it was a solo episode that I would have a guest for you this week, and I am coming through with that. Tonight's guest, or I guess whenever you're listening to this, Joe Normal of the rock band Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, going to be talking to him tonight. And just a really good rock and roll band. You know, I mean, we play things from different genres on here. You know, a lot of punk and alternative. But tonight, kind of talking to someone who's more ingrained in the rock and roll scene. Which, I mean, rock is such a general term to begin with. But you know, someone who identifies as just, you know, an American rock and roll band. And, you know, kind of underappreciated. We talk about it a little bit in this episode, but, you know, we're not seeing the singer-songwriters that once existed, like The Replacements, my all-time favorite band, The Replacements. I mean, that's a good one of that. You have Paul Westerberg, who's just this amazing singer-songwriter who, you know, knew that you just needed a few chords and just amazing lyrics, you know, something relatable to make a good song. And I mean, obviously, The Replacements as a whole are also an amazing, amazing band. But, you know, just a great rock band like that. And you're not seeing them come out like that anymore. So, you know, Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs is definitely a breath of fresh air in that sense, you know, with rock and roll. A band who, you know, you'll hear things in it where you go, oh, yeah, you know, like, they remind me of this band or this band, you know, like The Replacements is a good example. You know, I mean, definitely some Replacements influenced rock and roll. And it's something that, you know, we're not hearing enough of now. So, you know, I'm more than happy to play and expose anyone I can who's, you know, still putting out some genuine music like that. So it was a total blast to talk to Joe Normal. Whether you know his music, whether you don't, you're going to learn about it tonight. And obviously play you some songs. I don't know why I keep saying tonight either, because to be completely honest, while I'm recording this is more like an evening. I ought to be saying evening right now. But besides the point, I'm really excited for you to hear it. Very excited to have him on. And we are going to have another guest for you next week. Not going to say anything yet. I'll just tease that. Because obviously we still have tonight to go through. But very excited to talk to Joe Normal and let you hear all about it. And like I said, just want to thank everyone for checking us out. And you can always stay connected with the show. We're online at Power Chord Hour, everywhere that you can find us. Spotify, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. I'm trying to think. I believe I hit them all right there. But all of those are at Power Chord Hour. Go give us a follow if you will. Would love the support. And I always love talking to people. Hit me up, powerchordhour@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the podcast, about some of the topics we talk about, all of that. A little shout out to Brandon Weaver, who hit me up last week. And I was just kind of talking about, you know, we talked all about record labels last week, and was talking, you know, he was telling me how, you know, at one time he categorized all his CDs by labels, you know, and Drive Thru Records being one of the biggest ones, which I just thought was so rad to hear, because that stuff, you hear it when I interview people. Like you could hear it when I talked to Joe Rio. You know, our last guest was Joe. We got another Joe tonight. So I was making sure that I didn't just accidentally say Joe Normal. But when we talked to Joe Rio of Hidden in Plain View, you know, I mean, I was talking a lot about Drive Thru Records and how special, you know, they were and everything. And it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to someone who is on Drive Thru Records or just someone who is into them as well. I love hearing about, you know, people who are also into it in that way, because not everyone, you know, you forget that sometimes. Like I know me personally, like, I mean, I love music. Obviously I do a radio show and a podcast about the damn thing. You know, obviously I enjoy music, you know, you can probably tell, but you forget sometimes that not everyone is so ingrained like that. And there's a lot of people who, and I really, we did talk about it last week too, kind of like that, like with labels, how, you know, people who maybe listen to, say, Top 40 radio, I'm generalizing here, but there are a lot of people who just kind of listen to whatever the radio plays, and that's about it. You know, they don't really they may go pick up an album from an artist that they like. You know, maybe there's a lot of hits on the radio from a certain band, so they'll go like buy that album or something. But they're not someone who like follows a band. You know, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you're not on the radio, you don't exist, which is sad. But there's a lot of people like that, you know, which hurts a lot of artists' careers where, you know, they may not be on the radio anymore. You know, you used to hear them all the time. Maybe they're not on the radio anymore. But that doesn't mean that they're broken up. They're just not being played on there anymore. And, you know, that definitely screws with bands, but there's a lot of people who are like that. So, you know, just what I'm getting at is, you know, it's very cool to hear from people like Brandon Weaver who hit me up and you know, are into the music as much as I am. So you kind of know, you know, you're not the only one who gets that stoked. You know, someone else does, you know, shit like that, like, you know, categorize, you know, their music by labels and stuff. Like, I love that stuff. I love hearing things like that. So, you know, hit me up, talk about music, any of that, powerchordhour@gmail.com. And I also have some pins and a couple t-shirts left, so if you want some free radio swag, also hit me up there, and I'll send you that stuff for free. So we're going to get into it right now. Going to play you the interview, then play you some Joe Normal tunes. And so right now, here it is, my interview with Joe Normal from Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast. Right now on the Power Chord Hour, we're talking to Joe Normal, frontman of the rock band Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs. And the band has been at it now for a few years, bringing their replacements in Springsteen-influenced rock and roll to any lucky crowd who's been able to see them play. And we're going to talk Anytown and a whole lot more with Joe Normal. So, Joe, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How's everybody out there?
We're doing good out here, and, you know, kind of getting started. You know, you guys have been at it now for a few years, I know. But, you know, for people who are new to the band, how did the band get started?
You know, we're all friends from kind of like the late 80s, early 90s Sunset Strip scene. So like we kind of have a history and a friendship that goes back that far. But the band is only about 4 years old. I was ready to quit the music business, and I was really disillusioned with everything. And I was like, you know what? You know, I can't have this. I got to do this because I love music. And I decided to put a new band together and just do it because we love to do it. But also just to kind of like... you know, if we got something to say, you know, we say it. I'm not afraid to speak out about shit. And then I don't know if I could say that on the air.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead, man.
But the idea of performing live in a venue and kind of bonding with an audience to kind of uplift them and take them out of their miserable lives for an hour and to send them off on their way to be inspired. I mean, because 4 years ago, I went to see Springsteen, and that's what he did for me. And I'm kind of carrying the same torch with our band now.
I like that. I mean, that seems that's a good place to come from, I feel like. And so it sounds like then before this, you said you were kind of like at the end of your rope with music then. So like this band has kind of like rejuvenated you musically, would you say then?
Oh yes, definitely. You know, when I say like kind of at the end of the rope musically, it's more from like the business angle of things. You know, I didn't like the music I was hearing on the radio. I don't like the artists that they're selling. All the great artists are kind of moving on. They're dying. All the great performers, you know, it's diminishing, and somebody's got to fill that gap. And I don't like what they're filling it with. I got really disillusioned by that, and that's kind of like I hit like a really low. I was getting depressed, and I was like, somehow I got kind of a second wind, and I'm, you know, off and running again. So
I like that. And, you know, kind of going back further for you when you started music, you know, going back to the beginning, like who were your original influences? You know, who originally made you want to write songs, play guitar? Who was that for you?
It was The Who, the Beatles, the Clash, Joe Jackson. You know, I'm kind of like a product of that, you know, late 70s, early 80s thing. But I had older sisters who introduced me to artists like Elton John, T-Rex, David Bowie, the Beatles. So those were like the early influences. And, you know, I grew up near WKNJ radio, which was a college station near my town, Elizabeth, New Jersey. And they would play all the cool new wave stuff that was coming out. You know, you'd hear the punk rock songs, and like that was all new, and it was really underground. And, you know, for a kid who was 13 and 14 years old, I mean, that was like an awesome thing to discover, you know.
You know, something that's interesting, you know, like you just said, you're originally from New Jersey. There's something about that state musically where I think there's almost a New Jersey sound, that I think you can kind of attach to the state that I don't feel like every area in the country has per se. I don't think it has. Everywhere has that same magical kind of thing. Like, would you agree with that? Like, do you feel like New Jersey kind of has? There's just something about it where there's something special about that. Like when you're from,
Yeah, I would go even further. And being from New Jersey, there's a northern and a southern Jersey sound too. If you think about it, Northern Jersey is more of the British rock influence thing. Dramarama, the Smithereens, the bands that I was in, the 000s, and the Zeros later, which was more of a glam pop rock kind of thing. But Southern Jersey, they're more that Americana kind of thing, where you get like the Springsteen and like even Bon Jovi kind of leaned more into that a little bit. That was kind of the metal thing. I wasn't into that. I was into the northern sound, which was more of the working class, the blue collar, the hardcore. When you go South Jersey, you get more into that shore sound, the beach and that kind of thing. So that's how I say it. This is kind of a duality to the Jersey sound.
That's interesting. I mean, because as an outsider, I've never really thought about that, how it's kind of split in half like that. So I mean, would you give credit then to New Jersey for kind of shaping some of that songwriting? I mean, it seems like some of your influences, definitely in Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, like including in your newest stuff, definitely sounds like it's New Jersey influenced, by like a lot of the bands and whatnot from being.
I think it's area. You know what, Anthony? I would say it was more the environment. Jersey, like where I grew up, was a freaking factory town, blue collar, refineries. It's a port city, Elizabeth. You go look it up on the map. It's the Liverpool of America. It was a place that growing up in the 70s was tough, man. It was like, a lot of racial violence, crime, everybody's scamming you. And it was a place that you wanted to get out of, you know what I mean? And so, I think that's the influence. It gives you that edge, I think the bands that come from there, they're better musicians, you know what I mean? Because it's like you're trying harder, It's not about glamour. It's not about that. It's like working hard to be the best you can at what you do. And I think that kind of ethic is sort of what fueled us, you know what I mean? I don't know if that answers your question, but it's more about the environment than it was about the bands that were local or anything.
I like that, actually. I mean, it does. It kind of, what I get from it is there's a hunger there that you may not have everywhere else.
Yeah, that's
that I like that. I mean, just, and like I said, I mean, as an outsider, I feel like you can hear that, but I feel like that does something to the music. You can tell where it comes from. You can tell bands and influences from there. And that's interesting because, I mean, that would make sense that the environment has to do with that as well. I mean, that makes total sense where, that would kind of play into your music. So, I mean, like what would be like one of the major differences then? This would be, you've kind of been in two big musical hubs. I mean, we're talking New Jersey, and then, I mean, like now Los Angeles and California and whatnot, that's a huge, obviously the biggest musical hub in the country. What are like the differences, would you say, versus, playing music and being in a band in New Jersey versus doing it in California?
A lot more outdoor concerts.
I can imagine.
It's all changing right now. So everything's changing right now. But I think the difference would be California is more industry minded in the sense where everybody's trying to like follow what's happening. You know what I mean? And get their foot in the door and ride the wave. And I mean, and California's big for surfing. I mean, it kind of makes sense. But that's the California thing. California are more conscious of how you look and your package and how you present yourself and image and all that. This is the land of TV and film, and everybody's a freaking actor here, And in New Jersey, it's like I was saying, it's like you're more concerned about getting the best you can be at what you do, as opposed to trying to be seen. So like with the Anytown'rs, we got the best of both worlds. We understand being a great musician first and a great songwriter and performer, and then you add on top of that, how you look, how you present yourself, how you, like Kiss, Kiss understood that, the stage show, so we make, like, if you put Kiss and the Beatles together, it's like, But yeah, I think that's the difference.
I like that, but I like where you're coming from too, because yeah, I think and Kiss is a good example of that, where I think you have to first, you have to have a good product. Like like the music has to be good first, and that's much more important than the visual side. The visual side's important too, to a certain degree, but if the product itself isn't good, then you just kind of have crap that looks nice, basically. So I like that
Yeah.
you're kind of coming from it, from the other way of product first, and then we worry about an image. And I kind of wanted to get into, kind of some of the different influences, from Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs. What I like about it is I feel like, you definitely have different influences, but I feel like you also wear them on your sleeve and you can hear them. And I know I just mentioned it to you, when I first listened, that I definitely hear some Replacements influence in there, and definitely like Paul Westerberg's songwriting. I mean, I feel like all that seems like an influence for you. I mean, do you remember the first time you heard the Replacements? They're my favorite band, so I love talking to anyone into them. I love talking to other musicians about them.
Yeah, I love the Replacements. Paul Westerberg, he's, American songwriter with an electric guitar. I think, there was something I was going to say about that was like, you say like, where your influence is on a sleeve or whatever. I mean, I'm a songwriter who plays an electric guitar. I mean, I grew up on probably some of the same music that Westerberg did, so you're going to hear those influences coming through in a similar way. But what I would say is, with the guitar, I mean, it's like, it's just an electric guitar, band, drums, bass, singer, drum, a couple guitars or whatever. It's going to sound a certain way unless you're trying to be innovators with the sound and you get like a Van Halen or a Tom Morello or something where it's them when you hear it. I mean, that's not kind of the direction I went in. It was a point where I decided years ago, I'm either going to try to be the best guitar player there is or focus on trying to be the best songwriter. And I chose the songwriter path. So I kind of like stopped at a certain point with developing the guitar wizardry. I mean, I can kick ass. I mean, we play as a trio, and I definitely can burn the room up with the electric guitar. But for me, it's more about delivering a song and carrying that over to the people, and just focusing on that.
Earlier you did mention that like, you kind of aren't into a lot of the stuff that's kind of being pumped out right now in music and whatnot, and how there's not a lot of like kind of great new people coming out and replacing the old ones. Like, kind of speaking of the singer-songwriter with a guitar, the Paul Westerbergs and whatnot, like, do you feel like that's one of those ones? Or, I mean, I guess, no pun intended, but aren't being replaced. Like, we're not really getting, new like singer-songwriters and kind of come out and, like you were talking about, understand the importance of, hey, I only need 3 chords. What's more important is I need to write, can I write a good song? Can I write something relatable? It's not so much about the technical side. Do you feel like we've lost a lot of those singer-songwriters?
Yeah, I would say, they're dying off. There's probably a bunch of them that are out there, that are undiscovered yet. The type of singer-songwriters you hear now are that sort of like acoustic guitar, kind of drony, sort of, whiny, sleepy shit. And nobody's like stirring it up, you know what I mean? And everybody's all content with, chill and all that. And I'm not content with that, man. It's like this world is a mess and somebody's got to step up and stir it up, man, and it's like, you could do that better with a band than you can, as a songwriter than you can with an acoustic guitar. But I write on an acoustic guitar, so I'm bringing that quality to the music. It's a song first, and then it's a band sound second. And I think Westerberg understood that. Tom Petty understood that. Pete Townsend understood that. These are the greats. Prince understood that. And those are my heroes. Those are the people that I'm kind of walking the same path as.
Good influences. I mean, those are definitely some good ones to have there. And, talking kind of about the live show, it seems like that's a pretty important part of the band. I mean, is that something that you guys like really work on a lot with it? Like making sure you have a really tight live band together?
You know what it is? It's our histories. 3 guys who have known each other for a long time. We get in the room, we step on a stage together, and it's just chemistry. It's not like we don't work on it. I mean, we just go up there. Maybe, on one show, somebody will do something kind of funny or something cool, and we'll do it again the next time because it worked, But like, we don't sit there and like mastermind anything. But I think like when you see, I don't know, I'm not even sure who the great bands are anymore, because it used to be you had three guys like the Police or four guys in a band or five like Oasis or whatever, where there was a chemistry and that was the magic. But now you get like one artist at the front of the stage and a bunch of faceless musicians behind them supporting them. And I don't know, like we're like a table, you need the three or the four legs to hold it up. And that's sort of how I see our approach. And, I think the audience sees the band on the stage interacting with each other and laughing and whatever it is that we do. I don't even know. I'm just up there rocking out, But it translates, It seems genuine, I guess, because it is.
And as far as live shows, kind of like in the LA area, is it easier to find gigs around there, or is there just so many bands that it's more difficult to kind of find live shows? Like I've always wondered that with an area like that, just when you have so many bands in one, basically hub.
I think what I see is kind of boiling down to this. We're a rock and roll band. We're not a heavy metal band. We're not like a punk band. We're not like an acoustic, snoozer fest. We're a rock and roll band. Those types of venues are hard to find to play now. We play in the pubs because people who go to pubs, they're beer drinkers, they're rock and roll kind of people. Those are the places that we play. So, I could just walk into the local bar and play with my band, and that's our crowd, just kind of blue collar people. But like if you want to get into the bigger venues, so hard to get into. There's still the pay to play thing happening in LA, and there's only a few places left to play. Sunset Strip died years ago. You got the Whiskey A Go-Go, which is kind of like a landmark that stays alive because it is a landmark. But they cater more to the hard rock kind of thing, so it's hard for us to get in there. So we're pub rock, I guess is what you call us, pub rock. And I'm proud of it, man. My grandfather was a bartender. I grew up in that environment. It's beer, piss, and spit, and rock and roll, man.
That's all you need, though.
And bricks, and brick walls.
I mean, I can't disagree with that. Those are the best kinds of shows, honestly. I mean, I would much rather go see a show in a pub or a dive bar, somewhere like that than, kind of a I don't know, a stuffy, theater or, even bigger like arenas and stuff. Like a lot of times those aren't even fun. I rather the energy of a small place like that. So
it's kind of, we're in an uncertain time right now because they just closed all the bars, like I had 5 gigs booked. They all got canceled. We were doing a huge festival, a benefit show it's called Rock Against MS. And it was at the Palace Theater downtown. It was going to be Dramarama, Steve Stevens, Orianthi. They had a whole bunch of people coming down to support and do this big concert, and that got canceled. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I saw Smithereens were still going out, and they were like, screw the virus, we're going out, we're playing. And
Really?
I support that. That's my attitude too, but. We'll see what happens. I mean, that was 2 days ago before we got the message about the closing the pubs and the bars.
Yeah, that'll definitely make it difficult. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, even for obviously so many bands right now for, great reason are canceling things, but it's like once, even though you may say, oh, well, we're going to go play, you may not have a place to go play pretty soon, with all these closings. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to kind of see how that pans out. I mean, hopefully for musicians' sakes and everyone else as well, hopefully all that gets kind of resolved and figured out pretty fast. Kind of, I've been looking, and I mean, the Anytown'rs, all of you have, quite a great musical background. You've all been doing it for a while, like you said. And I mean, I was going down a list of some of the people you guys have worked with. Different people from the band work with, like Dramarama, Stiv Bators of the Dead Boys, Sylvan of the New York Dolls, tons more. Is there anyone that you've worked with in music or that you've played with throughout your career, like that you're most proud of, that you were like, oh, like that's kind of a milestone for me?
I've only been in a few like bands, and they tend to be kind of long term. I'll give you a couple names of people. The first thing was the Zeros, the purple-haired Zeros. They were originally called the 00 Zeros in New Jersey. We wrote a song that Howard Stern started using as his theme song, and he used it for years. This is going back to like 1983. This is crazy.
Oh,
how old I am.
nice.
But then I did a band. My brother was the drummer in that band. We did the Hutchinsons after that as a power trio. A couple other things, Cold Blue Rebels, who I'm still in touch. Danny from the Zeros, our bass player. We started a thing that was a rockabilly, psychobilly thing. I was really into rock and roll, rockabilly music from the 50s. And that was about 10 years ago or so that we started that. And then just now with this, the Anytown'rs is, I think, the thing that's most closest to my heart, because it's sort of my voice, my songs out front, and just putting my own work into the world now. But I'm really grateful to have a band that understands that vision and supports it. Tony Babylon, my bass player, Tony Snow, my drummer, are awesome. I mean, they've played with Sylvain from New York Dolls. Tony Snow is with Dramarama. My bass player, Tony Babylon, I got two Tonys, the Anytown'rs. I kid around. Yeah. Babylon plays with Izzy Stradlin.
Nice.
They record together. So like everybody's out there doing stuff, kind of making an impact. And, to have those guys who have such credibility come and be a part of this is really meaningful to me. It says that this, has a worth and value outside of my own freaking head,
Yeah,
So,
not a bad backing, or not a bad band to have. It seems like you have some really good musicians, that you're playing with, and it seems, like we were just talking about it as of right now. Obviously venues kind of shutting down for the moment. I'm sure some of this is a little uncertain, but as of right now, what are Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs plans for 2020?
we've got a few songs that are in need of like mixing, and I definitely want to get out there and get the music out fast. I've got a lot of things that are very poignant right now that need to be said and heard. I want to get those out like in the next 30 days if possible. I was working on some solo stuff as well at the same time. I have a record that I want to make that is about, it's kind of an autobiographical and geographical record that kind of talks about where I come from as Anytown. That's the idea. The concept of the Anytown thing is just, I'm just a regular Joe from a town in America, but I've seen a lot of shit. I had family members that were murdered and things, and I got a lot of stuff to say, and I think there's other people out there that had hardships growing up that may kind of relate or identify with some of the things that I want to put on this record. And it's very musical. It's kind of melodic. It's mostly piano driven because piano was my first instrument. I played piano for a couple of years before I picked up a guitar, and so it'll be a little bit different. So those are like the two projects coming this year. Definitely going to get that stuff out.
Nice. I mean, and yeah, that's, you might as well. I mean, with the uncertainty of like playing shows and stuff, it'll be nice to be, like you said, you want to get some music out here. It sounded like very soon, like within a month or so. So yeah. Good time to hunker down and do that.
People are living in a state of panic and fear and uncertainty right now, and more than anything, they need a sense of hope. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big part of, where I'm coming from is that uplift. There's not a lot of uplift from the artists that are out there in the world. Everybody's talking about we're doomed or woe is me and I'm a depressed whatever, but people need somebody who can kind of cheerlead them on to get through the next 24 hours. And that's where I think I come in with my music. The song Anytown that we have, wherever you're from, we're all working together to make it through this. You're not alone, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's sort of where I'm coming from with the new music and everything that's coming out.
I like that. And, kind of closing up here for people who want to check out Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, where can people find you guys online?
You can find everything, Spotify, Here's the thing I got to say about Spotify. It's like there's all these platforms that keep popping up. It used to be iTunes, and then I'm on Rhapsody and I'm on Spotify. And it's like every time an independent band like mine has to start promoting themselves on a new platform, the numbers look shitty because it takes time for people to start finding you on those places, But like we've been working hard putting our music out there, and you can find it on Spotify. You can find it on, you can go to YouTube. There's a YouTube channel. There's a lot of like, I'm going to call them demo videos. There's unreleased songs on there. There's just stuff of me doing covers or whatever. But the main places I would say would be like Spotify, Napster, which used to be Rhapsody. It's all on iTunes. You can go to CD Baby. You can, download from there too. But there's two things you're going to find. You're going to find Joe Normal as a solo artist, because I've been putting music out for a number of years before I had the Anytown'rs. And then you're going to find the stuff that I do with the Anytown'rs, Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, which is spelled Anytown''RS.
Nice. So anyone who's checking this out, want to go find their music, and you definitely should. Great band. We're going to play some stuff here in a second. But go find them. They're all over online. And before we play some music, anything you want to add, Joe, as we close this out?
I just want to say hello to everybody up there in Jamestown, Great Lakes States. Thinking about you up there. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Well, thank you very much. And now we're going to play some Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs, and we're going to open it up right now with Anytown right here on the Power Chord Hour. Right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast, that was Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs with Even Now. Before that was Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs with Take Me With You, and opening up that block of music right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast was once again Joe Normal and the Anytown'rs with Anytown. And I want to thank Joe Normal once again for calling in and doing that interview. It was very fun to have him on this week as a guest right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast, as well as a radio show. We'll be playing this Friday night on the radio show. So, I guess I was going to say go check it out, but I mean, you could still check it out. I'm going to play, we'll have some extra time, so I'll play some different music and I'll be talking about different stuff. But you will have heard this interview, but you can hear it a second time and then hear me, play music and stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but go check that out. That is on the radio show this Friday night. Joe Normal once again with us. And like I mentioned, next week we're going to have another one. I'm not saying who it is. I've probably said it on here before, but I for a long time would like on the radio show before I did the podcast would like announce guests early on, like, because a lot of times you'll hit someone up to be a guest and it's very easy to get a yes, but a yes is very different from it actually happening. So a lot of times I'll get someone and I'll be like, oh man, like we're having this person on, and then it never happens. So what I like to say instead is we're going to have a guest next week. I'm not going to say who it is, because then if it doesn't happen yet or it takes a little longer, gets rescheduled, then I don't look crazy for saying, or look like a liar when in fact next week they're not on. But we should have a guest for you next week, and I'm very stoked about it. I'm going to say this much. If you enjoyed our Hidden in Plain View episode, which is our Joe Rio of Hidden in Plain View, when we had him on a few episodes back now, that is easily already our most downloaded podcast, our most popular episode for sure. And honestly, one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, one of my favorite guests I've ever had on the show. Got to have him on again with Hidden in Plain View, release some new music. But, that is one of our most popular ones. But what I was saying is, if you are a fan of that episode, I think you're going to like this guest I have for next week. It's basically, including if you like that format, because it's another guest. It's another guest who had a landmark album come out 15 years ago. And another band who kind of does things on and off. They're about to get together for a reunion tour, which I don't know. I guess we're going to have to talk about. I mean, now with this whole coronavirus thing, which, I mean, I thought the whole thing was just fucking like nothing forever. I'm like, okay, like whatever. I don't really think this is real. But then I don't know, like a few days before the recording of this podcast, and then I started realizing like, okay, some of this stuff is getting serious now. And then including with all the shows getting canceled and postponed. So it's like, next week, I mean, we'll be talking about things, but I guess I don't know. I guess it'll depend if the tour's still going on or not, if we'll be talking about the reunion tour that they're going to be doing, which has been selling really well and selling out a lot of venues. So kind of sucks if it gets canceled, but also understandable. You don't want to keep spreading this thing. But yeah, so hopefully another cool guest next week. But either way, I'll be back with another episode for you. And thanks for checking out this one. Give us a follow online at Power Chord Hour on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, Spotify. And, also hit me up, powerchordhour@gmail.com. Talk music, talk anything. Just, I like to hear from people. Let me know if you're listening to the podcast. I love to hear from people. And the radio show as well. I always say this, but if you listen to the radio show Friday nights at 10 Eastern on 107.9 WRFA in Jamestown, New York, which you can listen to from anywhere, WRFALP.com. You go there, you can stream the website, or not stream the website, you can stream the radio station on the website from anywhere in the world, from any town in the world. And you can also go check out the WRFA mobile app for the iPhone. Go download that and you can stream the station on there. So you can listen to us from anywhere. But what I was saying is, if you listen to the radio show, hit me up at that email. If you want to send in song requests, like if you're listening to the radio show, hit me up. Be like, hey, I want to hear this band, and I'll try to get those played. More than likely will. And I have some very good. We have our listener Grace, who our faithful listener, probably been listening to the show, or at least writing in. Probably one of the longest listeners, but the first person to really support the show. She's awesome. She's made our Power Chord Hour shirts. I always say you can hit me up to get one. But she's been for years now sending me in really rad song requests, and she'll try to stump me too. She likes to play Stump the DJ, and will give me obscure like punk bands from the 80s, like punk and hardcore bands, and I love it because I end up discovering all this music I'd never heard of. Like she sent something not too long ago, and it was like a British punk band from like '77, and then I go down this rabbit hole of like all these other bands where it's like, oh yeah, like you forget like some of these eras, like. I love that era, but it's like, you think of like the Sex Pistols and the Damned, and like, you have like a handful of like UK bands from like that 77 era, but all of a sudden she's throwing me ones where I'm like, I don't even know who the hell this band was. They haven't existed in 40 years, but here I am now discovering this like really cool 7-inch they put out, 40 something years ago. So I always love to hear that. I always love talking music. Getting song requests, all that, powerchordhour@gmail.com. And that's going to be it for this week. Check it out next week, or check me out on the radio later on this week. And that's going to be it for this episode. So for the Power Chord Hour, I'm Anthony Merchant, and thank you very much for listening.